The morning sun hit the glass windows of the penthouse like it did every other day. 50 floors above the streets of Manhattan. Everything looked small from up here. The cars, the people, the problems. Everything except the emptiness that filled every corner of this massive apartment. David Wellington sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. 23 missed calls from his father. He didn't need to listen to the voicemails to know what they said. The same thing they always said. Disappointment. Anger. Questions about why he couldn't just be normal. Why he couldn't just fit into the perfect life that had been designed for him since birth. He was 19 years old and had never made a real decision in his life. Not one that mattered anyway. His father decided where he went to school, what he studied, who he should be friends with, what clubs he should join. Every single piece of his life had been arranged like furniture in a showroom. Pretty to look at, but nobody actually lived there. David walked through the penthouse. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors. 12 bedrooms in this place, 12, and he was the only one here most nights. His father stayed at the office or traveled for business. The staff came and went on schedules. They smiled, did their jobs, collected their paychecks, and went home to their real families. He stopped in the kitchen and opened the massive refrigerator. It was stocked with everything. Organic fruits, imported cheeses, expensive wines, food prepared by a private chef and left in carefully labeled containers. He grabbed an apple and bit into it. It tasted like nothing. Last night had been the final straw. His father came home late, around midnight. David was still awake, sitting in the living room, trying to work up the courage to say what he'd been thinking for months. When his father walked in, barely acknowledging him, something inside David snapped. "I'm not going to business school," he had said. His father stopped, turned slowly. The look on his face wasn't surprise. It was cold calculation, like he was looking at a problem that needed solving. "We've discussed this," his father replied. "You start at Harvard in the fall. Everything is arranged. I didn't arrange it. You did, because you're too busy feeling sorry for yourself to make actual decisions." The words hung in the air like smoke. David felt something crack inside his chest, not his heart breaking. That had happened years ago. Slowly, piece by piece, every time his father chose work over him, every time a nanny put him to bed instead of his parents, every birthday party attended by paid staff and kids whose parents did business with his father. "I don't even know who I am," David said quietly. His father checked his watch. "You're a Wellington. That's all you need to know. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." That was it. The conversation was over because his father decided it was over. Just like everything else in David's life. Now, standing in the kitchen in the morning light, David made a decision. His first real decision. He was leaving. He went to his room and grabbed a backpack. Not the expensive designer luggage in his closet. Just a regular backpack he'd bought once on a whim and never used. He threw in some clothes. Regular clothes. Jeans and t-shirts, not the button-down shirts and slacks his father preferred. He grabbed his wallet, his phone, and his laptop. Then he stopped. The laptop went back on the desk. The phone went on the nightstand. He pulled out his driver's license and 2 credit cards from his wallet, along with $800 in cash he'd withdrawn weeks ago for reasons he didn't understand then, but made perfect sense now. Everything else stayed behind. The penthouse was silent as he walked to the door. No one to say goodbye to. No one to ask where he was going. The doorman in the lobby tipped his hat like always. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington." "Just David," he said. "It's just David." The doorman looked confused but smiled anyway. "Have a good day, David." The street was crowded. Real people going to real jobs. Living real lives. David walked for blocks, just walked, until he found himself at the Port Authority bus terminal. He'd never been here before. Never had a reason to take a bus anywhere. Inside the terminal was chaos. People rushing. Announcements echoing, the smell of coffee and exhaust and humanity all mixed together. David stood in front of the departure board looking at destinations. Cities he'd never visited despite all his father's money, places that were just names on a map. His eyes landed on one, Pineville, Georgia. He didn't know anything about it. Didn't know a single person there, perfect. The ticket cost $47. The bus left in 20 minutes. David found his seat near the back. The bus was half empty. An older woman sat across the aisle knitting something blue. A young couple a few rows up argued quietly about directions. A man in a work uniform slept with his head against the window. Normal people, living normal lives. As the bus pulled out of the station, David watched the city disappear behind him. The tall buildings getting smaller, the life he'd known for 19 years fading into the distance. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Something like hope. The ride took 14 hours. David dozed off and on, watching towns and fields pass by the window. Every mile felt like shedding a layer of skin. The expensive watches, the private schools, the father who saw him as an investment rather than a son. All of it falling away with each passing mile. It was dark when the bus finally rolled into Pineville. The station was just a small building with a bench out front. No crowds, no chaos, just quiet. David stepped off the bus and looked around. This was it, a town that probably had more churches than stoplights, where people actually knew their neighbors, where life moved at a different pace. He had no plan, no reservations, no idea what he was doing. And for the first time in his life, that felt right. There was a motel down the street. The sign was old, the paint faded. The Pineville Inn. It looked nothing like the 5-star hotels his father stayed in during business trips. It looked perfect. David walked toward it, his backpack over one shoulder, $800 in his pocket, and no idea what tomorrow would bring. Behind him, the bus pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the night. He didn't know it yet, but his real life was about to begin. Not in a penthouse overlooking the city, not in boardrooms or private clubs, but here in a small town where nobody knew his name or cared about his father's money. Here, where he was about to learn that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. The motel door chimed as he pushed it open. An elderly man looked up from behind the desk, eyes curious but kind. "Need a room, son?" David smiled. It felt strange on his face, genuine. "Yes, sir, just for tonight." But it wouldn't be just for one night. Though he didn't know it yet, Pineville was about to become the place where everything changed, where a young man with everything would meet a woman with almost nothing and learn the most valuable lesson of his life. David woke up to sunlight streaming through thin curtains. For a moment he forgot where he was. The bed was lumpy, nothing like the memory foam mattress back home. The walls were painted beige, with a landscape painting that looked like it came from a discount store, but somehow he'd slept better than he had in months. He reached for his phone out of habit before remembering he'd left it behind. No morning emails, no calendar notifications, no messages from his father's assistant about meetings he never agreed to attend. Just silence. The clock on the nightstand said 9:30. David got up and looked out the window. Pineville in the daylight was even smaller than he'd imagined. Main Street had maybe 20 buildings total. A diner, a hardware store, a pharmacy, a church on the corner. People walked slowly, stopping to chat with neighbors. An old man sat on a bench feeding pigeons. It was the opposite of Manhattan in every way. David showered and got dressed. When he reached for his wallet to check out, his stomach dropped. The wallet was gone. He checked his backpack, his pockets, under the bed. Nothing. The window was closed, the door had been locked. But the wallet was definitely gone. His hand started shaking. $800. His ID, his only credit cards, everything. He must have left the door unlocked last night. He'd been so tired, so distracted. Someone must have walked right in while he was sleeping. David sat on the edge of the bed, trying to steady his breathing. Okay. Think. He could call his father, admit he'd made a mistake. Have money wired. Be back in New York by tomorrow. Back to the life he'd tried to escape. No, he couldn't do that. Wouldn't do that. He went downstairs to the front desk. The same elderly man from last night was there reading a newspaper. "Morning, son. Checking out?" "I need to talk to you about something," David said. His voice came out shaky. "My wallet was stolen last night." "From my room." The man's expression changed. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Your room was locked?" "I think I forgot to lock it." "Uh-huh." The man didn't sound sympathetic. He sounded suspicious. "That's convenient." "What?" "No, I'm not trying to get out of paying. I just need to figure out what to do." "What you need to do is pay for your room. $45. I'm telling you the truth. Someone took my wallet." The man crossed his arms. "Son, I've been running this motel for 30 years. I've heard every story. Rich kid shows up out of nowhere, fancy clothes, pays cash. Now suddenly the money's gone? You trying to scam me? I'm not scamming anyone. Then pay for the room. David felt panic rising in his chest. I don't have any money. The man studied him for a long moment. Then he sighed. You got two choices. I call the sheriff, let him sort this out. Or you work off what you owe me. Work it off. We need help around here. Cleaning rooms, maintenance, whatever needs doing. Minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. You work 6 hours, we're square. Then you can move along. David had never cleaned anything in his life. At home there were people for that. But what choice did he have? Okay, he said quietly. I'll work, the man nodded. Good, there's a storage closet around back. Nancy will show you what to do. She's our head housekeeper. Nancy turned out to be a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd worked hard for decades. She was black, shorter than David, with gray streaks in her hair pulled back in a neat bun. When the manager explained the situation, she just nodded. Come on then, she said to David. Lots to do. The storage closet smelled like cleaning chemicals. Nancy handed him a mop, a bucket, and a cart loaded with supplies. You ever cleaned a room before? She asked. David shook his head, embarrassed. She didn't laugh at him. Didn't make him feel stupid. She just said, that's all right. I'll show you. The first room was a disaster. The previous guests had left towels on the floor, trash overflowing, stains on the bathroom counter. Nancy walked him through each step. Strip the beds, wipe down all surfaces, clean the bathroom, vacuum, fresh linens, stock the towels. It looked easy when she did it. When David tried, everything went wrong. The mop left streaks on the floor. He used glass cleaner on the wood furniture and left marks. He couldn't get the fitted sheet to stay on the mattress corners. His back started hurting after 20 minutes. His hands, which had never held anything heavier than a tennis racket, started to blister from gripping the mop handle. By the third room, he was exhausted. His fancy shirt was soaked with sweat. His expensive jeans had a bleach stain on them. He'd knocked over a bottle of cleaning solution and the smell was giving him a headache. Nancy found him in the storage closet on his break, sitting on the floor with his head in his hands. He wasn't crying, but he was close. She didn't say anything at first. Just sat down next to him, her old knees cracking. She pulled out a brown paper bag and unwrapped a sandwich. Turkey and cheese, she said, breaking it in half. You hungry? David was starving. He'd skipped breakfast. I don't have any money to pay you back. Did I ask for money? She handed him half. Eat. They sat in silence for a few minutes. The sandwich was simple. White bread, deli turkey, a slice of cheese, yellow mustard. It was the best thing David had ever tasted. You running from something? Nancy asked finally. David didn't answer right away. Maybe, or running to something. I don't know anymore. You got people worried about you? He thought about his father. The missed calls. My father, probably. But not worried the way you mean. More like worried I'm embarrassing him. Nancy nodded like she understood. My daddy was like that. Nothing I did was ever quite right. Wanted me to be someone I wasn't. She finished her half of the sandwich. You know what I learned? Sometimes the hardest work isn't the physical kind. It's figuring out who you are when nobody's telling you who to be. David looked at her. This woman who'd just met him, who had no reason to be kind to him, was sharing her lunch and her wisdom like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm terrible at this, he admitted. At cleaning. At all of it. Baby, everybody's terrible at something when they first start. She stood up, brushing crumbs from her uniform. But you know what? You showed up. You didn't run when it got hard. That's more than most people do. She held out her hand to help him up. Come on, let me show you the right way to do this. And I mean really show you slow and steady. For the rest of the day, Nancy worked alongside him. She showed him how to fold the corners of sheets so they stayed tight. How to clean mirrors without leaving streaks. How to spot stains that needed special treatment. She worked with patience, correcting his mistakes without making him feel stupid. By the time 6 hours were up, David had cleaned 8 rooms. His whole body ached. His hands were raw. He smelled like cleaning chemicals and sweat. But he'd done it. He'd actually completed something with his own 2 hands. The manager checked his work, grunted approval, and told him he was square. David stood outside the motel as the sun started to set. He had no money, no ID, no way to get home even if he wanted to. He should have been terrified. Instead, he felt something strange. something almost like pride. Nancy came out, her shift ending. She had a tired smile on her face. "You did good today," she said. "Where you staying tonight?" David hadn't thought that far ahead. "I guess I'll figure something out." She studied him for a moment, the way mothers do when they're deciding whether to trust someone. Then she sighed. "There's a room above the barber shop on Main Street. Old man Jenkins rents it out cheap. $50 a week. You got any money at all?" "No, ma'am." "All right, then." She reached into her purse and pulled out 2 20s. "You pay me back when you can. And tomorrow you come back here. If you want to keep working, I'll talk to the manager. We could use an extra set of hands." David stared at the money. This woman who barely knew him, who probably didn't have much to spare, was helping him. No questions asked. "No judgment. Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. Nancy smiled. "Because somebody did it for me once, long time ago. And because you got something in your eyes, something that says you're trying to find your way. Can't fault a person for that." She patted his arm and walked toward an old sedan in the parking lot. David stood there holding $40, feeling like he was holding the whole world. For 19 years, people had done things for him because his father paid them to. Because it was their job. Because of what they could get in return. Nancy helped him because that's who she was. As he walked toward Main Street to find the barbershop, David realized something. He'd left New York with $800 and lost it all within 24 hours. But somehow he felt richer than he ever had before. Tomorrow he'd wake up and do the work again. His hands would hurt. His back would ache. But he'd show up. Because that's what Nancy said mattered most. And for the first time in his life, he wanted to be the kind of person who kept showing up. 3 weeks passed like water through fingers. David fell into a rhythm he never knew existed. Wake up at 6. Walk to the motel. Clean rooms until 3. Go back to the tiny apartment above the barbershop. Sleep. Repeat. His hands stopped blistering after the first week. The calluses that formed felt like badges of honor. His back stopped aching so much. His muscles adjusted to the work. But more than his body changed. Something deeper was shifting inside him. Nancy packed 2 lunches every day now. They'd sit in the storage closet or out back by the dumpsters eating sandwiches and talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her 3 kids. All grown now, all doing well. Her daughter was a teacher in Atlanta. Her 2 sons worked in construction, both with families of their own. "Raised them by myself," she said one afternoon, unwrapping ham and cheese. Their daddy died when the youngest was only 5. Factory accident. One day he left for work and he never came home. David stopped chewing. "I'm sorry, me too. Every day I'm still sorry." She looked out at the parking lot. "But you know what? Those kids needed me to keep going. So I did. Worked 2 jobs for years. This one and night shifts at the truck stop. Saw them off to school in the morning, tucked them in at night, slept maybe 4 hours in between. That must have been impossible." Nancy smiled. "Wasn't impossible. Was just life. You do what needs doing when people count on you." She handed him an apple from her bag. "What about you? You got people who count on you?" David thought about his father. About the empty penthouse. "I don't think anyone's ever really counted on me for anything important." "That's because you never gave them the chance. You were too busy running." She was right. He'd spent his whole life being taken care of. People did things for him, not with him. He'd never been needed, only accommodated. "How do you do it?" David asked. "Stay so positive after everything you've been through?" "Who says I'm positive?" Nancy laughed. "Baby, I have bad days like everyone else. Days when my feet hurt so bad I can barely stand. Days when I look at my bank account and wonder how I'm going to make it stretch. But feeling sorry for myself never cleaned a room or paid a bill. So I get up and keep moving." David thought about that a lot over the next few days. Just keep moving. Simple but not easy. On Sunday, Nancy invited him to dinner. "Nothing fancy," she said. "Just family meal. But there's always enough." Her house was small, maybe 1,000 square feet. The paint was fading and the porch steps creaked, but flowers bloomed in window boxes and the front door had a wreath that said, "Welcome," in cheerful letters. Inside was chaos in the best way. Nancy's daughter was there with her husband and 2 kids. Both sons came with their wives and children. 7 grandkids total, ranging from 4 to 15. The house felt like it might burst from all the life inside it. The kids ran around playing tag. The adults crowded into the kitchen, talking over each other, laughing, teasing. Nancy moved through it all like a conductor, stirring pots, setting the table, hugging grandchildren, settling minor disputes. David stood in the doorway feeling completely out of place. He'd been to dinner parties at his father's penthouse, catered events with staff in white gloves serving courses on china, string quartets playing in the background, adults in expensive clothes making small talk about stock portfolios and vacation homes. This was different. This was real. "You must be David," Nancy's daughter said, walking over with a smile. "Mama told us about you." "I'm Patricia. Come on in, don't be shy." They made room for him at the table. It was crowded, elbows bumping, reaching across for dishes. The food was simple. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread. Nothing from a gourmet kitchen. "Everything made with love," Nancy said grace. Everyone held hands around the table, heads bowed. David couldn't remember the last time he'd prayed. Maybe never. He listened to Nancy thank God for family, for health, for food on the table, for new friends who needed a place to belong. He felt his throat get tight. Dinner was loud. Everyone talked at once. The kids told stories about school. The adults shared news about work and neighbors. They teased each other, laughed at inside jokes David didn't understand but somehow still felt part of. Nobody asked him about his past. Nobody questioned why a 19-year-old was working as a motel cleaner in a town where he knew no one. They just accepted him, made space for him, passed him the potatoes and asked if he wanted more chicken. After dinner, the men went out back while the women cleaned up. David started to help with dishes, but Nancy shooed him outside. "Go on. You work enough during the week." He sat on the back porch with Nancy's sons and their father-in-law, drinking sweet tea and listening to them talk about football and fixing cars and whose turn it was to help their mama with yard work. "You play any sports?" one of the sons asked David. "Tennis. Some golf." It sounded so pretentious saying it out loud. They didn't make fun of him, though. Just nodded. "Never tried tennis. Looks hard." "It is," David said. Then added, "But not as hard as cleaning 8 rooms in a shift." They all laughed at that. Real laughter. The kind that makes your stomach hurt. Later, as people started leaving, Nancy walked David to the door. Her grandkids hugged him goodbye like he was family. The smallest one, a girl maybe 5 years old, handed him a crayon drawing she'd made during dinner. "It's you," she said proudly. The stick figure had crazy hair and a big smile. David looked nothing like that, but he took the drawing carefully, like it was made of gold. "Thank you," he said. "I'll keep it forever." Nancy walked him out to the porch. The night was warm, crickets singing in the darkness. "Your family is amazing," David said. "They liked you too. Patricia said you seem like a good soul who's been through something hard." "Is it that obvious?" "Baby pain recognizes pain. But so does healing." She sat down in her rocking chair. "You going to tell me what you're running from eventually?" David sat on the porch steps. For the first time, he wanted to tell someone. "My father has $8 billion. I grew up in a penthouse with 12 bedrooms. I had everything except anything that mattered." Nancy didn't look shocked, just nodded slowly. "And you thought coming here working for minimum wage that would fix what's broken?" "I don't know what I thought. I just knew I couldn't breathe there anymore." "Money doesn't make people bad," Nancy said. "And not having it doesn't make people good. What matters is what you do with what you got, who you choose to be when nobody's watching. Who do you think I should be? That's not for me to say. That's between you and God and whoever you see in the mirror." She rocked slowly. "But I'll tell you what I see. I see a young man learning how to work, learning what it means to earn something with your own hands. That's good. That matters. But eventually, you're going to have to figure out what comes next. What if I want to stay here, keep working at the motel?" Nancy smiled sadly. "You could, but we both know that's just trading one hiding place for another. The penthouse or Pineville doesn't matter where you are if you're still running." Her words stung because they were true. He'd left New York thinking that was the solution. But Nancy was right. He was still hiding, just in different clothes in a different place. 2 days later, something happened that changed everything. David was cleaning a room when he heard shouting from the parking lot. He looked out the window and saw Nancy talking to a man near her car. Even from a distance, he could see she was upset. He dropped his cleaning supplies and ran outside. Nancy had tears on her face. The man who looked official with a clipboard was getting into a truck. "Nancy, what's wrong?" She wiped her eyes quickly. "It's nothing. Just some bad news. Tell me." She took a shaky breath. My grandson. Patricia's boy, Timothy. He's got an infection, needs antibiotics. The pharmacy says it's $300 without insurance, and Patricia's insurance doesn't kick in at her new job for another month. $300? Might as well be $3,000. Nancy's voice cracked. That baby needs medicine and I can't help. I got maybe $80 until next payday. David's mind raced. He had nothing. No access to his accounts. No credit cards. He was just as broke as anyone else in this town. But he had one thing. One emergency credit card he'd kept hidden in his shoe just in case. He'd sworn he wouldn't use it. That he'd do this on his own. But this wasn't about him anymore. What pharmacy? He asked David. No. I wasn't asking you for anything, I know. I'm offering. What pharmacy? An hour later, David stood in the drugstore parking lot, hands shaking. He'd paid for Timothy's medicine. $347. The card had gone through, which meant his father would see the charge. Would know where he was. But Timothy would get better. That's what mattered. He thought Nancy would be angry when he told her. Instead, she pulled him into a hug right there in the motel parking lot. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. She pulled back and looked at him seriously. That card you used. Someone's going to come looking for you now, aren't they? David nodded. Then you better be ready, Nancy said. Because whatever you've been running from, it's about to catch up. And when it does, you need to be ready to face it. Not as that scared boy who got off the bus, but as the man you're becoming. That night, David lay in his small apartment above the barbershop. He held the crayon drawing Nancy's granddaughter had made. He thought about the calluses on his hands, about Nancy's family making room for him at their table, about a little boy who'd get medicine because David finally did something that mattered. His father would come. David knew that now. The question wasn't if, but when. And for the first time, David thought maybe he was ready. The black SUVs arrived on a Thursday morning. 3 of them. Rolling down Main Street like they owned the place. People stopped what they were doing to stare. Pineville didn't see vehicles like that except in movies. David was mopping the lobby floor when he saw them through the window. His hands froze on the mop handle. He knew those cars. He knew what they meant. His father had found him. The lead SUV pulled into the motel parking lot. The others followed. Men in dark suits got out first, looking around like they were scouting enemy territory. Then the back door of the middle vehicle opened. Robert Wellington stepped out into the Georgia sun. Expensive suit. Diamond cufflinks catching the light. Salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. He looked exactly like what he was. A man worth $8 billion who wasn't used to waiting for anything. David's legs felt weak. Part of him wanted to run out the back door. Disappear into the woods behind the motel. Keep running like he'd been doing his whole life. But Nancy's words echoed in his head. You need to be ready to face it. He put down the mop. Wiped his hands on his jeans. Walked outside. His father saw him and stopped. For just a second, something flickered across Robert Wellington's face. Shock, maybe. His son stood there in a stained t-shirt and worn jeans, hair messy, hands rough from work. Nothing like the boy who'd left New York 6 weeks ago. David. His father's voice was controlled, cold. Get in the car. No. Excuse me? I said no. David's voice shook, but he stood his ground. I'm not going back. Robert looked around at the motel, disgust clear on his face. You've been living here? Working as a janitor? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? For who? You or me? Don't be smart. You've made your point. You ran away, played poor. Proved whatever you think you needed to prove. Now it's time to come home and stop this nonsense. It's not nonsense to me. Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. David, you're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing me. Embarrassing the Wellington name. Whatever little rebellion this is, it's over. What's going on out here? Nancy's voice cut through the tension. She walked out of the motel office, still holding her cleaning supplies. She looked at the SUVs, at the men in suits, at Robert Wellington with his $1,000 shoes, then at David. Nancy, it's okay, David said quickly. This is a private family matter, Robert said, not even looking at her. Nancy crossed her arms. This is my workplace. That makes it my business. She looked at David. This your father? David nodded. Nancy studied Robert for a long moment. Then she turned to David. You want to talk to him? The fact that she asked, that she gave him a choice. It meant everything. Yes, David said. But not out here. Can we use the office? Course you can, baby. Robert bristled at the familiarity but followed David inside. Nancy started to leave, but David stopped her. Stay, please. His father's jaw tightened. David, we don't need an audience. She's not an audience. David struggled for the right word. She's the reason I'm still here. They stood in the small motel office. Robert looked around at the outdated computer, the worn furniture, the coffee maker that had seen better days. Everything about his expression said he thought this place was beneath him. 6 weeks, Robert said. You disappeared for 6 weeks. Do you know what I've been through? The private investigators, the worry, the questions from business associates about where my son went. Did you worry about me? Or about what people were saying? Don't try to make me the villain here. You ran away. You stole money from your trust fund. It's my money. You're 19 years old. You don't know what you need, and you do? David felt anger rising. You decided what school I'd go to, what I'd study, who I'd be friends with. You decided my entire life without ever asking me what I wanted. Because you're too young to know what you want. I'm old enough to know I don't want to be you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Robert's face went red. You ungrateful little Mr. Wellington. Nancy's voice was quiet but firm. Maybe you should listen to what your son is trying to tell you. Robert turned on her. I don't recall asking for your opinion. No, sir, you didn't, but I'm going to give it anyway. Nancy didn't flinch. That boy walked in here 6 weeks ago looking lost. Like he didn't know who he was or where he belonged. Like someone had spent his whole life telling him what to be instead of helping him figure it out for himself. You don't know anything about my son. I know more than you think. I know he shows up every day on time, works hard even when his hands hurt, shares his lunch with the new guy who doesn't have money, paid for my grandson's medicine when I couldn't. She paused. When's the last time you had a real conversation with your son, Mr. Wellington? Not about business or school or what he's supposed to be doing, but about what he's feeling. What he's afraid of? What makes him happy? Robert opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked uncertain. You think you're here to save him, Nancy continued. But maybe he's been trying to save himself from a life that was killing him slowly. You got all the money in the world, but your boy was drowning in it. I gave him everything, Robert said, his voice quieter now. Everything except what he needed. Nancy looked at David. Tell your father what you told me. About the penthouse. About feeling invisible. David took a breath. There were 12 bedrooms in our home. I was alone in all of them. You were never there. And when you were, you only saw what I wasn't. Not smart enough. Not driven enough. Not enough like you. His voice cracked. I didn't run away from money, Dad. I ran away from feeling like I didn't matter. You matter. You're my son, my only child. Then why did it take me disappearing for you to notice I was gone? The question hit Robert like a physical blow. He sat down heavily in one of the office chairs. For the first time, David saw his father look old, tired, almost vulnerable. Your mother, Robert started, then stopped. When your mother died, I didn't know how to be both parents. I thought if I could give you everything she couldn't anymore, the best schools, the best opportunities, I thought that would be enough. I needed you. Not your money. I know that now. Robert looked up at his son. These 6 weeks. Not knowing where you were. If you were safe. It was the worst time of my life since we lost her. And I realized I'd been losing you slowly for years and I was too busy to see it. David felt tears threatening. He'd never heard his father talk like this. I'm not coming back to the old life, David said. Not the penthouse. Not Harvard. Not your plans for my future. Then what do you want? I don't know yet. That's what I've been trying to figure out. David glanced at Nancy. But I know I want to matter. To do work that helps people. To be around people who see me, not just the Wellington name. Robert was quiet for a long time. Outside, one of the SUVs started up, then shut off again. Finally, he spoke. I can't promise I'll understand this, or that I'll be good at it, but I can try. He stood up. What if you came back, but we started over? You tell me what you want to do. We figure it out together. You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. You know that. Robert looked at Nancy. It seems my son found something here I never gave him. People who care without expecting anything in return. Nancy smiled softly. He earned that care. By showing up. By being genuine, by letting people see who he really is. David looked between Nancy and his father. 6 weeks ago, these two people didn't exist in his world. Now they were the two most important people in it. I need time, David said. I'm not ready to leave yet. Robert nodded slowly. How much time? I don't know. But when I come back, it'll be because I'm ready, not because you made me. I can accept that. Robert pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. My direct line, call me. Not about business. Just call me. Tell me about your day. About this place. About whatever you want. David took the card. It felt strange in his hand. An olive branch from a man who'd never offered one before. His father walked to the door, then turned back. The medicine. For Nancy's grandson. That was a good thing you did. She would have done it for me. Robert looked at Nancy. Thank you. For taking care of my son when I wasn't. Nancy nodded. He's a good boy. You did something right even if you can't see it yet. After the SUVs left, David and Nancy stood in the parking lot watching the dust settle. That was brave, Nancy said. I was terrified. Bravery and being terrified aren't opposites. They usually come together. She put a hand on his shoulder. Your daddy heard you today. Really heard you. That's a start. David thought about his father's face. The vulnerability he'd never seen before. Maybe people could change. Maybe it wasn't too late for them. Nancy, David said, when I do go back, I want to bring you with me. Not to work. To help me figure out what comes next. You've got wisdom I need, she smiled. We'll see about that. But first, those rooms aren't going to clean themselves. Come on. As they walked back inside, David felt something shift. He wasn't running anymore. He was choosing. And that made all the difference. 5 years changed everything and nothing at all. David stood in front of the mirror in his New York apartment, adjusting his tie. Not the penthouse anymore. He'd sold that place and bought something smaller. Only 3 bedrooms. A place that felt like a home instead of a museum. Through the window, he could see the city waking up. The same city he'd run from all those years ago. But he was different now. The boy who'd gotten on that bus to Georgia didn't exist anymore. His phone buzzed. A text from Nancy. Don't forget to pick me up at 7. And don't you dare be late to your own event. David smiled. Nancy had moved to New York 2 years ago, though she kept her house in Pineville. She went back every few weeks to see her family, but most of the time she was here working alongside him. He grabbed his keys and headed out. The foundation headquarters was downtown. A converted warehouse with exposed brick and big windows. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The sign outside read, Wellington Hayes Foundation for Worker Dignity, Nancy's name next to his. Equal partners. That's how it had to be. Inside, the staff was already preparing for tonight's gala. 5 years of work had led to this. 5 years of building something that actually mattered. After that day in Pineville, David had stayed for 3 more months. He kept cleaning rooms, kept learning from Nancy, kept having Sunday dinners with her family. He and his father talked every week. Real conversations, difficult ones sometimes, but real. When David finally went back to New York, he had a plan. Not his father's plan. His own. He told his father he wanted to create something new, a foundation focused on fair wages, worker rights, and dignity for people in low-income jobs. His father was skeptical, said it wasn't profitable, said it would hurt the company's image. David stood firm. Then I'll do it without you. That got his father's attention. They negotiated for weeks, finally reached an agreement. David would join the family company, but he'd run this new division his way. His father would fund it initially, but after that it had to sustain itself. Most people thought it would fail within a year. It didn't. The foundation started small, partnering with hotels and motels to improve working conditions, fair wages, healthcare access, education opportunities. They worked with companies who wanted to do better but didn't know how. David brought Nancy on as a consultant first. Then as a full partner, she knew these jobs from the inside, knew what workers needed. Her voice carried weight that his never could. Together they created programs that actually worked, not charity, not handouts. Real systemic change. The division became profitable within 18 months. Turns out treating workers well meant they stayed longer. Worked better. Companies saved money on training new people. Everyone won. David's father was shocked. At a board meeting 2 years in, Robert Wellington publicly admitted he'd been wrong. "My son saw something I couldn't," he said. And he was right. That moment meant more to David than any amount of money ever could. Now, 5 years later, the foundation had helped over 15,000 workers. They'd partnered with 200 companies, changed policies in 3 states, and tonight they were celebrating with their biggest fundraiser yet. Nancy arrived at David's apartment right on time. She wore a deep blue dress that her daughter had picked out. Her grandkids had helped her choose jewelry. She looked elegant and powerful and exactly like herself. "You ready for this?" David asked. "Baby, I've been ready. Question is, are you ready?" They arrived at the gala venue together. The ballroom was packed. Business leaders, politicians, nonprofit directors, journalists, and most importantly, workers whose lives had been changed by the foundation's programs. David saw Maria, who'd been a hotel housekeeper making minimum wage 5 years ago. Now she was a supervisor making twice that, with health insurance and her kids in college. He saw Jerome, who'd worked in a warehouse with no safety equipment. Now his company had proper training and equipment, and he'd been promoted to management. These were the success stories. Real people, real change. The evening started with dinner. David sat at the main table with Nancy, his father, and several foundation board members. Robert Wellington had become one of their biggest supporters. He'd even started applying their principles to his own companies. The relationship between father and son wasn't perfect, but it was real. They argued sometimes, disagreed often, but they talked. They listened. They tried. When it was time for speeches, Nancy went first. She told her story. A single mother working 2 jobs, raising 3 kids on her own, meeting a lost young man at a motel and choosing kindness. "I didn't help David because I expected anything back," she said to the crowded room. "I helped him because that's what you do when someone's struggling. You reach out, you offer a hand, you remind them they're not alone." She paused. "What I didn't know then was that he was going to reach back, that together, we'd build something bigger than either of us could have done alone." The room erupted in applause. Then it was David's turn. He walked to the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. 5 years ago, he would have been terrified. Now he knew exactly what to say. "I grew up with everything," he started. "Money, privilege, opportunities most people never get. But I was miserable. Because having everything means nothing if you don't know what to do with it, if you don't know why you have it." He told them about getting on that bus, about losing his wallet, about Nancy showing him how to clean rooms and in the process how to be human. "She taught me that work has dignity. Every job, every person. The woman cleaning your hotel room, the man serving your food, the person stocking shelves at the store. They all deserve respect, fair pay, safe conditions, the chance to build a better life." David looked at Nancy. "Someone once told me that showing up is what matters most. So we built this foundation on that principle. We show up for workers. We show up for companies trying to do better. We show up for each other." He shared the numbers. 15,000 workers helped. Average wage increase of 32%. Healthcare access up by 60%, but then he stopped. Numbers don't tell the whole story, though. The real story is Maria being able to send her daughter to college. It's Jerome coming home from work without injuries because his company finally has proper safety equipment. It's single mothers like Nancy was being able to support their families with dignity. The speech ended with thunderous applause. People stood. David saw his father wiping his eyes. Robert Wellington, who never cried, was crying. After the formal program, people mingled. David worked the room, but he kept being pulled back to one group. Nancy was surrounded by workers they'd helped. They were laughing, sharing stories, taking pictures. She looked happy, at home, exactly where she belonged. Later, as the event wound down, David and Nancy stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The same city where his story had started, where he'd felt so lost. "You thinking about Pineville?" Nancy asked. "How'd you know?" "Because I am too. Thinking about that scared kid who couldn't mop a floor to save his life." She smiled. "Look at you now." "Look at us now," David corrected. "None of this happens without you." "Maybe. But you were the one brave enough to leave everything behind. To risk being uncomfortable. That took courage." David thought about that bus ride, about standing in the Pineville motel with no money and no plan, about being so lost he didn't even know which direction to go. "I wasn't brave," he said. I was desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Nancy spoke again. Your mama would be proud of you, the man you became. David felt his throat tighten. You think so? I know so. Because you didn't just take what you were given. You asked what it was for, what it meant. That's the question that changes everything. David looked at the city lights. Millions of people out there, working hard, trying to make ends meet, dreaming of something better. We're just getting started, he said. There's so much more to do. Then we better get to work. Nancy put her hand on his arm. But first, let's enjoy tonight. Let's celebrate what we built. Tomorrow we can change the world again. As they walked back inside, David realized something. He'd spent his whole life looking for purpose, searching for meaning, trying to figure out who he was supposed to be. He found it in the last place he expected, in a small town, in a storage closet, in the kindness of a woman who had every reason to ignore him but chose not to. Nancy taught him that wealth isn't what you have. It's what you give. It's how you show up for people. It's the choice to make things better, even when it's hard. The ballroom was still full of people. David's father was talking with board members. Workers were sharing their stories. Donors were writing checks. All of it mattered. All of it was good. But the thing that mattered most was the woman beside him. Nancy, who'd split her sandwich with a stranger, who'd taught him how to work, who'd believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. She'd saved his life. Not by giving him money or connections or opportunities, but by showing him what it meant to be human, to care, to matter, and now together they were passing that gift forward. One worker at a time, one company at a time, one act of dignity at a time. The boy who had everything learned from the woman who had little. And together they discovered that the greatest wealth is measured not in dollars but in lives changed. In dignity restored. In the simple, powerful act of showing up for each other. That was the real story. Not about money or success or redemption, but about connection. About two people from different worlds finding common ground and building something beautiful on it. As David drove Nancy home that night, she fell asleep in the passenger seat. He looked over at her and smiled. His friend, his partner, his teacher, the woman who changed everything by offering half a sandwich and treating him like he mattered. And he did matter. Finally, he knew that. Not because of his last name or his bank account, but because he'd learned what Nancy had tried to teach him from the very beginning. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and showing up is what matters most.